Welcome to the Heroes of Fantasy Football Podcast.
And welcome into another episode of the Heroes of Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host tonight, Matt High, joined. It's been a little bit, but we got Warren Weber with us tonight. Everyone else is off enjoying the night, so we get to talk about some running backs from this past season. So first off, how are we feeling tonight?
We're feeling pretty good. I'm a little chilly, but, feeling pretty good other than that. How you doing? How's it been?
Been pretty good. We've had a lot of good football. I know you probably disagree after last week, but we won't dive into that too deep. But it's been a wild year. Did you take home any championships this year, or just get snubbed out?
Not this year. I think the highest I took was second. Finished third in a guillotine league, but other than that, nothing. No championships, unfortunately. But had a lot of injuries this year. A lot of injury problems. So.
This year was pretty rough. My redraft team dealt with injury. It was like every other week. Or I lost Nick Chubb early. Then I lost Kyron Williams for a bit. It was just everyone. Tank Dell, all on my team. Justin Fields midway through the season. It was rough just trying to figure things out. But that league I finished third place because I lost by just over a point in the semifinal week, and then the person who beat me ended up taking home the whole championship. But in that week, my team decided to put up a league high score of 163 points. And now usually in that league, it's kind of like you hit 120, you're like in a good spot. My team was like, "You're out of it. Let's go." So sometimes fantasy is not very kind, but we're still going to play it anyway because it's fun. So, all right. So why don't we dive in here today? Like last week, we're going to go over this time the running back position, but going over draft capital, where they were drafted, did they help you? Did they bust? How often did they do that? Really just kind of do a deep dive in some of these guys to see, are there any kind of indications that we should look at next year when we're looking at these players and drafting in the top 12 at the position, or if it was kind of just fluky. But before that, let's go with our quick question. We're getting ready for the MVP discussion. I know Lamar, last I checked, I think Lamar was the favor to win it on DraftKings, and he was pretty favored. Most likely he will be, but is there anyone else that you would want to win the NFL MVP?
Yeah, for me, and I believe you and I had the same response here, but for me, it's CMC. I just think that for what he does for that team, and I mean, even his stats this year were just ridiculous, but even like for what he does for that team, I mean, if they didn't have him, I think that they would be in big trouble. And I get like Lamar, like it's a quarterback award, so he's probably a long shot to win it, but it'll probably be Lamar. But for me, yeah, I just think CMC he's just ridiculous, man. I mean, for a while there, Tyreek was in the conversation, but then he got injured. His numbers kind of fell off, but CMC for me.
Yeah, same here. I mean, that's who I want to win because I think he deserves it more. Not that Lamar Jackson doesn't deserve an MVP because he's been playing out of his mind this year. That team is they were actually like earlier in the season. I think it was me and Joe on an episode. We were talking about dark horse Super Bowl contenders, and I chose the Ravens because the offense, and I thought they were going to take a really big step forward from previous seasons, and I didn't expect this, but definitely so. There was going to the MVP conversation. I know right now it's Lamar. I mean, CMC was thought to be a contender. Brock Purdy for a bit was the leading person for that. CeeDee Lamb, I think, entered the conversation at the end of the season. It's been kind of all over the place, but if Lamar doesn't win it, I think it should go to CMC because, like you said, that offense runs through him. It's such a well-run offense. And, the Niners do this every year. And last year we saw exactly this. CMC just gets dropped in, and it's just playing crazy every game. So definitely, if he gets it, I would be very happy. But it's most likely going to be Lamar, who, again, I don't want to take anything away from him. He deserves it because of what he's overcome on that offense and how that offense is turned out, despite losing players. Mark Andrews is no longer well. I know he practiced today. We're recording on Thursday. Sorry, usually we record Wednesday. Thursday to January 18th. So he had a full practice today, but they're getting healthy. I feel like they could take down the whole thing. I know you being a Browns fan don't want to hear that, but I think it might be happening.
Yeah, unfortunately, I probably have to agree with you. I'd love to see Houston take them down this week, though. I would, especially since they just smashed us in the mouth. But it's probably a long shot for that. But
nothing would make me happier, because sometimes you just got to let the world burn. I would love to see a Packers-Texans Super Bowl, because both teams were pretty much written off at the beginning of the year, and both just blew out their opponents in the first round of the playoffs. So that'd be really cool. I don't think it's going to happen. It's very unlikely, but
that would be something. That would be something.
It would be nice if the Packers can finally beat the Niners this time without Aaron Rodgers, because I know every year there was like the same thing. Is Aaron Rodgers going to beat him? Nope. Next year, is Aaron Rodgers going to beat him? Nope. Now Jordan Love comes in, makes the playoffs on pretty much the same team, and has a chance to do what Aaron Rodgers could not do. So,
yeah,
just saying, it'd be fun. But all right, so let's segue into our main topic here. So we're going to go over our top 12 running backs over these. So basically, a boom week was a running back scoring more than 24.5 fantasy points. So this is half PPR scoring. And a good game was anything over 11.8. And then a bust would be less than 6.1. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, I think on the quarterback episode, this is an average from every top 12 finish across the season. So 17 weeks. We're going to focus on the fantasy season. So weeks 1 through 17. I averaged these numbers to get these. They're not just kind of pulled out of the air. These were averages of the finishes on a weekly basis. So without further ado, we have our running back one. Go figure. It is Christian McCaffrey. He was drafted as your running back one, and he finished as the RB1. 22.6 fantasy points per game, 31% boom, 94% good, 0% bust. What else could we say about CMC that hasn't already been said?
Yeah, I mean, he's just so good. And this is like this isn't even 17 games played. This is 16. Normally you'd see this type of numbers out of 17 games, but I mean, over 2,000 yards. I mean, over 20 touchdowns. I mean, that's the 1,500, almost 1,500 rushing yards on only 270 carries is impressive in itself. I mean, I don't know what that equals out for like the yards per carry, but I mean, it's got to be a ridiculous number. I mean, clearly just deserving the top spot.
Yeah, what do we got? 1459, 273, over 5 a carry, 5.3 a carry.
Yeah, so that's crazy.
That's pretty impressive. He's just so safe. Like, now going into now let's fast forward to 2024 drafts. Is he your first overall pick? Is he your RB1?
I think he has to be. I think he has to be at this point. I mean, he's just been so good for 2 years in a row. I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't be.
Yeah, I think he's entering his age 28 season. That's usually right around where we start to see some of these running backs not trail off, but I guess kind of get closer to the wall and maybe lose a step. I don't personally think that's going to happen with CMC. I think he's built differently. He's probably an outlier. So I don't think he's going to have the same limitations, and I think you get an extra year or two out of a running back of his age. We saw it with kind of Austin Eckler this year. We'll get into him later, but things started to look a little different. I don't see what there's really not much else to say about CMC. He's just really good at football, and if you had him, you were very, very excited. He did exactly what you drafted him to do, and another full season. So he didn't have to deal with injuries. I think he's pretty safe next year. So moving on to our running back 2 on the season, we have Raheem Mostert, the Miami Dolphins. Now, this one was very surprising. I don't think anyone at all in the entire fantasy industry saw this as a ceiling for him. Being an older running back on a team that is a committee. They have Jeff Wilson. They had Devon Achane. So, like, going into this year, you probably got him super late. I mean, he was drafted as the RB 41. So, going over his stats, he averaged 17.2 fantasy points per game, 20% boom rate. We have a 60% good and 13% bust. Now, those bust games were, I mean, they hurt, but it didn't really matter because the draft cost was very, very low. So you were able to overcome it. Now, did you kind of ever think that Raheem Mostert, old man Mostert, was going to be able to put up this kind of season this year with all those things going on?
No, I mean, I always thought he was a good running back, but not this type of number. I mean, this is pretty wild. I think it is pretty important, for him especially, that they have, like one or two other running backs that can kind of step in and take some of the workload off, because he is injury prone, and we've seen that in the past. But I think that's good for him, because he, if he was an every down back, I don't think he puts up these type of numbers personally. So I think that him having those other guys that can come in, it helps him out, and it just helps overall. I mean, you look at his like 209 rushing attempts. I mean, that's not a lot for a running back, but he still puts up 1,000 yards, which is just insane. I don't know what that yards per carry is, but that might be even more ridiculous than what CMC had. I think he had the same amount of touchdowns as CMC, 21, I think, for both of them.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. CMC just had more receiving touchdowns, but yeah.
15 games played, so he did miss a game, or 2 games, but yeah, I mean, like I said, though, I think having Achane and Wilson is good for him, though.
Yeah, I think this is going to be very interesting going into next year, where the Miami Dolphins running backs go, because he's under contract next year. I don't think he's going anywhere, and at his age for running backs, and I'm 32, and we're calling people old, but we don't play football, so it's a little different. But Mostert will most likely be on that team. I don't know if they'll restructure his contract or anything, but we'll have to kind of wait and see. Devon Achane is the headline on this backfield. He was very explosive. Not to take anything away from Mostert, but I think in drafts next year, I mean, it's January, so we have a lot of time before we get to that point, but it might make sense to draft whoever comes later, out of Achane and Mostert, which would be Mostert. You're going to bet on the younger running back usually. And I don't know if that's going to be the smartest play. I mean, they could both do the same thing. They complement each other very well. They're both explosive, both fast, and we'll have to kind of wait and see. But I mean, the touchdown number, like we said with Jamal Williams last year, probably going to go down. So, but even still, I mean, he's a big focal point of this offense, and they did better when they were able to run the ball. So I think he's going to be a big contributor next year as well. You could probably get him even later. So, all right, running back 3, my favorite running back on the season, Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. Cam Akers was on the Rams, if people forget, for the first week or 2 weeks of the season, and it did not matter. He got kicked to the curb, and it was the Kyren show from there on out. And man, did he take that job and just run with it. Literally. He was undrafted in leagues, and he averaged about 20.1 fantasy points per games played. Now, he did miss 4 weeks during the season later in the year, so that's part of why. Boom was 33%, and good was 83, a 0% bust percentage. So when he was out on the field, he was just simply producing for fantasy. I mean, he didn't have a ton of carries, but he had a lot for the amount of games he played. Over 1,100 yards rushing, 12 touchdowns. What really spoke to me was how well he did in the playoffs for fantasy. He was the RB, I think 5, 3, and then 1. He was always he was a top 5 running back when it came to that. So I guess we'll put a little dynasty spin on this for this one. Being a 5th round draft pick, usually that means it means you're replaceable. Same coach, same offense, same quarterback, pieces around him. Where do you slot him in? Is he going to be able to repeat this year? Because he's going to be a polarizing player. It's either people are going to be in on him for next year, or they're going to say, yeah, he's going to be replaced, like the way of Dameon Pierce. So what are your thoughts on Kyron Williams here?
Yeah, I think that, for next year, I mean, I think the sky's the limit for him. He's running behind like a not great. I mean, they're okay, but like a not like amazing offensive line as well. So for him to be putting up these type of numbers behind that line is just insane. But yeah, I mean, I just don't see why he wouldn't produce the same type of numbers as he did this year. I think that he's more explosive than Dameon Pierce, for example. So that goes into it, and I just think he's overall just more consistent. When I watch this guy run, I mean, he's I think he's a smaller guy, but I mean, he runs with a lot of power and he has a lot of speed. So it's pretty impressive to see what he does out on the field. And again, like these numbers, I mean, he missed about a month with an injury, maybe about a month. And then, like you said, like the first week or two, he was splitting carries with Akers. So if he played all like full 17 games, I mean, his numbers might have been right up there with CMC, which is really impressive.
He was under just about 2.5 points off of the CMC pace. So yeah. CMC was 22.6 per game, and he was 20.1. He was the closest one by far of keeping that pace. So I'm in kind of the same boat. I mean, the Rams are going to either sign someone or they're going to draft someone. Now, we're going to get into it as we're doing the rookie prospects, shows. Not the best running back class so far. This is going to be kind of a year where I think the veterans hold a little bit more value than others, than the rookies for most cases. But he's someone that I don't think fits the Dameon Pierce kind of comp, where low draft pick gets replaced pretty easily. I think Sean McVay is going to feed him the ball as much as possible. I don't think it's going to be quite as much as what he did. I mean, he hit like 30 carries a couple games. I don't think they're going to be doing that. They're probably going to limit a little bit because that's how you win football now, is you don't have the same guy do everything unless you're the 49ers. And it works for them, but it's a different system. So I do think he's going to take a step back next year, but not to the degree where you should be worried. Instead of being the RB3, top 6 maybe, and still, I think that's going to be great. So if you have him in Dynasty, I think you should be excited. I wouldn't be trying to trade him on the thought that he might be replaced. I think he's pretty much safe. So, all right. So RB4 here, we have Travis Etienne on the Jaguars. Tale of two halves, pretty much with Etienne. He was drafted as the RB9, 14.9 fantasy points per game, 13% boom, 56% good, 19% bust. Basically, if he didn't score a touchdown, he busted. And there were a lot of times where he was putting up 2 TDs in a game. This offense, I was very excited about them going into the year. I think most of us were. I know me and Rich definitely were. And it never worked out. There was, whether it's bad luck or just things didn't work out the way they were shaping up to be. Travis Etienne is definitely a running back that has still a lot of ceiling because he's heavily utilized. This year, he got a lot more targets than last year. So that is good to see. A little bump in target share. Receiving touchdowns is, touchdowns are not a sticky stat, as you hear in every fantasy show you listen to or watch. But it's one of those, he played a full season. He was the guy on the team and was able to put up some touchdowns. So I guess for my question to you is, how high should he be in drafts next year?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Like you said, tale of two halves for him. I mean, he lit it up the first half of the year. The second half of the year, the offense just really stalled. Um, but yeah, for next year, I mean, this is a tough one. I don't know if I take him. I think for me personally, like maybe around like a fifth or sixth round pick. I mean, they dumped a lot of coaches after their terrible collapse, so we don't really know what that offense is going to look like next year. Um, good sign for him though is he played all 17 games. So that's always a positive. But and considering I had him on my team on I think I had him on two teams this year. I was really excited for him, and after that first half, I was like, yeah, man, like he's gonna be in the MVP conversation. Like this guy's awesome, and then all of a sudden it just fell apart. But I mean, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think like maybe like a fifth, sixth round max for me for this guy for next year.
Yeah, I think he'll go a little bit before that, but definitely, I don't think he's one of the absolute top backs next year. I think there's a couple guys that we'll talk about in a little bit that have the opportunity to jump him. I know Joe is very excited for him in Dynasty. We actually posted our Dynasty quarterback rankings on our X, so definitely check that out. You can follow the show there. We're going to be posting a couple things. I think I'm actually going to do the running backs tonight, so you'll see those as well. But yeah, it's going to be interesting what changes this offense goes through from this year to next. Like you said, a bunch of people got fired on this team and the coaching staff. So who do they get to fill, and are there any changes? Is Calvin Ridley still there? Is Zay Jones still there? Like there's going to be some growing pains potentially, but I think Doug Peterson is a competent enough coach that he'll be able to kind of squeeze out the best out of his players. This year for whatever reason, just unlucky or whatnot. I mean, there was a lot of touchdowns left on the field this year watching the Jaguars. So we could be very easily having a different conversation if a couple of those went the other way. But moving on to our RB5 here is Rachaad White. Now, I was not very high on Rachaad White coming into this year because I figured the efficiency concerns were going to be, we're not going to be able to kind of get over. I felt that was going to help hold him back a lot more than it did. But drafted as your RB30 this season, 14.3 fantasy points per game, 6% boom, 69% good, 13% bust. The Bucks by themselves, I think, were a team I wasn't very excited about. We kind of went over this. We were talking about Baker in last week's show. I kind of wrote them off, and they proved me wrong to a certain degree. And Rachaad White still had the same efficiency concerns as far as metrics. You know, under 1,000 yards on almost 300 carries is pretty low. But it was the targets. He dominated with the dump offs, and Baker is the dump off king after this season. So, are you concerned about him? Like, do you think he's going to finish as high as he did? Let's assume Baker signs a deal, nothing changes, so everyone stays in place on the offense. What do you think about Rachaad White after this season? Fluke or repeat?
I don't think it was a fluke. I don't think he'll be quite this high though. Like maybe around like an RB7, RB8. Um, but I still like his outlook for next year. Um, getting another year, another off season, another year behind that offensive line, really knowing their tendencies. And I know that their all pro center has been out like the entire year, so Ryan Jensen. So if they can get him back healthy, that just adds like another element to his production. But I was really impressed with this guy this year. I mean, every time I kind of looked at his stats, it was like he was put. I mean, I was in PPR leagues, so like, but every time I look, he was like the model of consistency. Like it was always like 13, 14, 15 points like every game, And like you said, like his boom percentage is only 6%, but like his good was about 70%, which is, I think the other than CMC and Kyron, that's the highest we've seen.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, he was just the model of consistency this year. But I mean, I do think he'll drop a little bit, but not too much.
Yes, he's one of the ones in the top 5 that I think will be an easy bet to take that he's going to drop out slightly. But we don't know what's going to go on with the Bucks. Is Baker signed? Is Mike Evans still there? Like a lot of things are going to change. So we'll have to kind of wait and see for that. But that seems to be the theme for a lot for next year, and you'll hear that from now until we get answers. And even when we have answers, sometimes we don't know their answers. So moving on here, we have the running back 6. Now, I know if you count weeks 1 through 18, he was the RB2, I believe, in PPR leagues. But again, weeks 1 through 17, the fantasy season, Breece Hall was drafted as the RB16. Entered the year still injured. There were concerns. You got him at a discount in drafts. 14 fantasy points per game, 13% boom, 50% good, 19% bust. Those bust games were pretty much just because the Jets offense was how do we put this nicely? They were just not good. And he suffered tremendously for it. Constant change in quarterback, this was a lost season for the Jets. Easy way to say it. But Breece Hall looked good, and he looked healthy. I know he had a pretty major injury. That's why there were a lot of concerns coming into the year. But did he look how he looked before he got injured last year to you? Because to me, he looks like he's completely back, and next year could be even better than this year.
Yeah, I was about to say, you gotta be pretty excited if you have this guy, especially in Dynasty. With Rodgers coming back next year. I mean, with what he did without Rodgers, and like you said, that terrible offense, like it's pretty impressive. But yeah, I mean, he looked just as explosive, maybe even more explosive than before he got hurt. So to me, yeah, you got to be pretty excited. And a lot of his games, like especially in the beginning of the season, was kind of working himself back from that injury, splitting carries with Dalvin Cook, and once that kind of ended, you really saw him take off.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at, he had 90 targets on the season, so that's incredible. I don't know how sustainable that will be, because if the offense is, let's say they take a step forward, which I think everyone would agree that they can't be worse than they were this year. That might go down a little bit because they might be rushing the ball more, but guess what? He's running back, so they're going to use him anyway. So his rush attempts might go up, but his receptions might go down. But I think it's a wash for me. Breece just looks like the guy he was drafted to be. Like he was the number 1 drafted running back in your fantasy dynasty rookie drafts a couple years ago for a reason, and he looks exactly the same as he did. So I think another year in this offense, another year with Aaron Rodgers, if he comes back healthy, which all signs point to that he will, I think Breece Hall will be definitely one of the top couple running backs. He might be the RB2 drafted next year when we get to training camps and stuff. So, all right. RB7, Mr. Joe Mixon on the Cincinnati Bengals. He was drafted as your RB11, finished with 13.4 fantasy points per game, 6% boom, 50% good, 6% bust. Now, for anyone who did not pay attention, Joe Burrow missed most of the season, and Joe Mixon started a little bit slow because the offense started slow. Then it started picking up. He did a little bit better. took a dip when Joe Burrow went back down, and at the end started getting a little bit more work. But he's another polarizing player, I think, for going into Dynasty and going into next season, because Chase Brown looked pretty good. Uh, do you have any concerns about Joe Mixon getting up close to the running back age wall, and just this offense in general? Do you think he should be in the top 12 conversation, or are you thinking more a little bit lower?
Again, this is kind of a weird one for me because, what does this season look like if Joe Burrow plays the whole season? I don't know. I really don't. I mean, for me, I would maybe try to stay away from him. Personally, I've never really been a huge fan of Mixon, so it's a little easier for me to kind of say to stay away from him. But he did put up decent numbers this year. But man, I don't know. What do you think about him?
I'm kind of with you. I was never the biggest fan of him. I always thought he had a decent opportunity on the Bengals, and it seemed like every year we were wanting more. And then the year he blew up, it was like finally it's his year. And then now this year, I mean, a lot of it could be attributed to the injury. I mean, that offense just simply wasn't what we expected. Joe Burrow got injured in preseason, so they started slow. He started getting back into the groove, and then he went back out. So I don't know how much you can really take away from this season for him, but it's really just taking your shot on an aging running back on what should be a good offense next year. So I do think he could be a good value in drafts. He might be someone in Dynasty that you're trying to acquire because he will be a little bit cheaper, but only if you're a contender. It's really hard. Like you said, I don't really know what to think about Joe Mixon. I don't feel strongly either way. He's probably going to be someone I'm just going to pass on and just say, I'll willing to be wrong that he's going to be good. So we'll see. But it's a lot of that offense is another one. They might lose T. Higgins. It's going to go through some stuff this season. Running back 8, we have Jahmyr Gibbs, the rookie on the Detroit Lions. He was drafted as your RB15 earlier in the year. 15 fantasy points per game, 14% boom, 50% good, and 14% bust. Now, he also missed a little bit of time. This offense was a little bit different than what we were expecting. We kind of thought that the running game was going to be good because Dan Campbell is kind of that kind of coach where he wants to be that ground and pound team. He wants to be a physical team. And they signed David Montgomery, and then they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs with was it the 10th or 12th overall pick in this year's draft. And everyone was like, oh, he's going to be the guy. And both were true. David Montgomery was great, and Jahmyr Gibbs came on strong, and he finished really strong. So I do think next year he's going to be one of these guys in the top 5 running back conversation, just because of the upside and the talent that we've seen. But do you think David Montgomery being there, because he's going to be there for the next at least 2 years, based on his contract, that it might you should temper your expectations on Gibbs, or are you just saying, screw it, he's great, I'm going to draft him with a top pick?
Kind of both. I think he is great, and especially if you have him in Dynasty, I'd be super excited for this guy. But I do think that as long as Montgomery is there, his numbers will be kind of around this area, like how they are right now. Maybe a little bit better. He'll probably get a little bit more time next year in the offense. But as long as Montgomery is there, I think that it's going to cut into his numbers a little bit. But like I said, like if you have this guy in Dynasty, you got to be just thrilled, because in a few years, I mean, I think he's going to break out and be like a top 2-3 type of running back.
Oh yeah, I mean his talent alone could do that very easily.
Yeah.
I can see that happening. It's just I see this as more of a 50-50 timeshare when they're both healthy. Like I know the way of the bell cow do it all 3 down back is kind of gone. Outside of a few cases, I don't know if it exists anymore. It's kind of like that lost relic that we're all looking for. If you find it, you hold on to it. But if not, it's just like, it's another piece of junk. Um, but both this season were able to maintain their draft cost, and that alone is great. They're both great. Jameer Gibbs was electric when he had the ball in his hands, utilized in I think the correct way on this offense. You never knew if he were going to rush or he could be used as a wide receiver. There were a couple times where they had Monty and Jameer Gibbs on the field. They didn't know who was getting the ball, but it worked well with this offense. Plus, this offense was a lot better than what we expected too. So that definitely helps as well because you just get more scoring opportunities. So that was great to see for both of them. But moving on here to our running back 9 is James Cook. Now, this is someone that also started a little bit slower um, during the beginning of half of the season, but he was drafted as your running back 24, 13 fantasy points per game, 6% boom, 56% good, and 19% bust. As soon as they fired was it Ken Dorsey? They just basically said, "You're running the ball. We're just going to keep going because it works, and you're good." Uh, that's when his production took a severe increase, and that's where a lot of the production came from. But he looked good too. I mean, this offense is still a Josh Allen led offense. The Bills are another team that there's going to be changes. There could be some drastic changes that we need to monitor during the free agency market. Uh, but James Cook, I think, is as safe a running back as you could probably get with the correct amount of upside and also a decent enough floor. Would you agree? Is he more of a ceiling play, or you think he's more a floor play?
I think he's. I think for next year, I mean, he's gonna put probably better numbers than this up. I mean, he's definitely ceiling for me. And this is kind of what I've wanted Buffalo to be doing for a long time now. I mean, even going back to last year, like Devin Singletary. I mean, if you watch that guy run on that offense, it seemed like he was picking up 5 yards every play, and I just didn't understand why they weren't giving him the ball more. And you see him now in Houston. I mean, he's killing it. I mean, he took over Dameon Pierce's job. I mean, he's killing it. I watched him last week just destroy the Browns. So, and yeah, I mean, now that they fired Ken Dorsey, I guess he was the problem the whole time with not running the ball. Now you really get to see a more dynamic Buffalo offense, which could be pretty scary for the future. But I mean, this guy, yeah, I think he'll be even better next year.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I agree with that. This offense is now. It seemed like they unlocked a little bit of extra juice with James Cook ever since the OC change, and they've been winning games. They've been playing better. It seems like this team just kind of shifted in its game plans, and it works. I mean, it helps to have someone at the quarterback position as talented as Josh Allen to do the things that he can do very well. Big arm, able to escape the pocket, make big plays with his legs. But part of that also helps when you have a solid run game. And with James Cook this year, ever since that firing, he was solid. He added an aspect to this offense that we have, like you said, we've been wanting to see. And I think they did. I don't know how they put the genie back in the bottle. They let it out, and now it's roaming around. And I think this is whoever they get to stick as OC next year. They're going to look at the success that the Bills had when they were able to run the ball well, and I don't see how they can change that. I mean, I know Stephon Diggs. That's going to be one of the big topics in the headlines that we're going to all have to pay attention to. is I know he gets unhappy when he doesn't get the ball like 12 times a game, but sometimes it don't work. So what works is running the ball. And they did very well with James Cook. So, all right. RB10, Derrick Henry from Tennessee Titans. This is probably his last season in Tennessee. I expect them to move on from him. They're probably going to, cut him, whether probably post March 1st or maybe post June 1st cut. We'll have to see. But drafted as your RB7, 12.7 fantasy points per game. 6% boom, 63% good, and 31% bust. Now, that bust rate, you really felt that this year with Derrick Henry. He wasn't the same guy. There were multiple weeks where he was outsnapped and outproduced by Tajay Spears, the rookie. It just didn't seem the same with Derrick Henry. Have we seen the end of 300 carries and just the dominating force that is Derrick Henry?
Yeah, it's tough to tell. Again, that Tennessee offense was pretty bad this year. They had Tannehill was terrible early. Will Levis came in. He kind of lit it up for a couple games, and he ended up being not that great either. So it's tough to tell. I mean, and that offensive line is terrible too. And they got rid of like everyone. Both their tackles are gone. I mean, so it's really it's hard to know with him. I mean, he still put up almost 1,200 yards, but again, like you said, the 31% bust. Like, is that his fault? I definitely think that he lost a little bit. He's clearly not as explosive as he used to be. But if you put him behind a good offensive line with a good quarterback, can he maybe bounce back? I don't know. What do you think?
I keep thinking of where he might end up. And for him at his age at the running back position, for me, the only way I can see him repeating what he's done in the past is with one location. And that would be the Baltimore Ravens. If he gets signed there next year, then I could see them utilizing him in the correct way for what he does best on an offense that should be able to score points, which is going to keep him, relevant for fantasy. But too often we see these aging running backs just hit that wall. As soon as they start to go, it's just down the end, and that's it. So it's going to be really hard to justify taking him with an earlier round pick. I mean, he's probably going to enter where the RB dead zone is. He's going to be one of those guys most likely next year, but you could hit on him, if things hit the right way, but it's not something I'm going to be actively pursuing. Going to Will Levis, like he was okay. He was kind of like a sparkler. He reminded me of a sparkler. Started up, it burns real bright, real good, and then it kind of just fizzles out, and then you have nothing. So that's what we were kind of dealing with on this offense. And then Tannehill was just one of the dud sparklers that never started to begin with. So it's hard to really justify taking him super early, but if you drafted him, you were definitely disappointed because although he had a 63% good rate, it didn't feel that way. It didn't feel like what we were used to. And unfortunately, that's just the running backs. So he's also got so many carries on his shelf. It's insane.
He has a lot.
So it's hard. A lot of wear. And I don't know if he's got new tires, but RB11. This is someone that collectively in the fantasy community we expected more from. We wanted more from, and sadly we were denied. Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. He was drafted as your running back 4, 12.5 fantasy points per game, 6% boom, 56% good, 13% bust. The only thing I want to say here is I'm very excited that Arthur Smith did not even make it to Black Monday. I went to bed that night saying I hope he gets fired tomorrow. I woke up to all in our chat saying, "Oh, Matt's going to be happy when he wakes up," and boy, was I. Arthur Smith held him back. In no world, figurative, literal, in any sense of any word in the dictionary that you can find that fits what I'm trying to say here, should Tyler Algier be out touching Bijan Robinson. No way. And yet he was in multiple occasions. Oh, he had a headache. We're going to keep him out. Thanks for telling everybody. I'm glad you got fined. And then, oh, yeah, well, Tyler's more of like a hammer. I don't care. You put the guy who's going to help your team win in the game, no matter what you need to do. It works. When you put your best players on the field, guess what? Good things typically happen. But that's not the situation we were in this year. 214 rush attempts on the season for someone of his talent and caliber. I'll let you take over because otherwise I'm going to go crazy.
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, going forward, this guy, like, you don't have to be, I don't think you have to be concerned about him. I don't think it matters what coach they bring in. They're going to run him more than Arthur Smith did. So you shouldn't be too concerned. However, I do think that they need to find a quarterback to kind of take some of that pressure off of him. But yeah, I mean, it was a circus all year with him.
It was just, it didn't make any sense. Like, I'm not a coach. I'm not an NFL GM. I'm not a quarterback. I don't play football. I never did. I played soccer. But use your eyeballs, man. If you see someone with this talent and the ability, like, remember when they started putting him in the red zone? He scored. It was very simple. It's like, oh, Bijan Robinson can't score touchdowns. Oh, that's because he's never given the ball anywhere near the red zone. And they started doing it, and it was like, boom, touchdown, boom, touchdown. It's like, really? We might be onto something. And Arthur Smith's like, yeah, nah, we're gonna go back to Cordero Patterson because why not? Oh, I'm so glad he's gone. So I apologize for my rant, but Bijan is someone that I think is going to, he very easily could be the RB1. I want to make sure people really understand that. He could take down CMC. His talent level is insane. He just needs to be utilized in the correct way, which this season is not. So if any manager in Dynasty is panicking based on that, you go buy him and you pay the farm because he will pay you dividends. Let's do it. Bijan is good. Let's play him. Oh, excuse me. All right, so to finish up here, we got the RB12 Isaiah Pacheco on the Kansas City Chiefs. I get riled up with running backs. I'm sorry, but he was drafted as your RB27, 13.9 fantasy points per game, 7% boom, 57% good, and 7% bust. As we kind of said in the quarterback episode, this offense ran through Isaiah Pacheco in the run game. He was the spark that led this team. If he was good, the team was doing well. Isaiah Pacheco was another 7th round draft pick. Found his way onto the depth chart, outproduced the 1st round draft pick in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and was better than Jerick McKinnon, who did it last year. This, I think, is the key to Kansas City's success this year and going forward is through a balanced run game. Take some pressure off Pat Mahomes. He's great. Probably going to end up being the best quarterback of all time. His wide receivers did not help him out. And the games, if you look back when they did the best, it was when Isaiah Pacheco was playing and he was playing a full game and getting all these carries to take the pressure off and allow the team to go elsewhere and do other things. So Isaiah Pacheco, is he top 12 for you next year or top 5? Where would you slot him in?
I'd say right around this area for him. Although I do think that he has potential to be higher. I just don't think that offense, they pass the ball too much for him to like you look at his rush attempts, like 205 on the year. I mean, they could have honestly been running him more and probably had more success this year.
He also missed a couple games too. He missed
did,
3
yeah,
games.
He missed 3.
So
Yeah.
add another 60. So you're talking 265 for a season. It's not bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
you know, I would imagine that they'd probably next year, maybe like a T Higgins, or I don't know what they're going to do, but you know, it's hard to tell whether he's going to keep that same type of production or whether he'll have a drop off. Maybe they go more pass heavy next year if they bring in a receiver. I don't know, but he definitely has potential to be probably top 10.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be. We're going to have to do a show on a wish list for free agent signings because T Higgins to the Chiefs, or I said it last show, Gabe Davis to the Chiefs. Both of those I think they'd be a lot of fun. Give Mahomes a good weapon. I think that'd be great.
He has one
Hopefully
though,
both happen.
and Kadarius Toney.
Yeah. Don't even get me started on him. You thought I went on a rant with Bijan. Oh man. All right. So now we're gonna get a little bit sad. We're gonna go over the running backs that you drafted in the top 12 that sadly did not make it there. So first we're gonna start off with Saquon Barkley. He finished as the RB16, but drafted as the RB7. The volume was there, but the team was just non-existent. Daniel Jones was terrible, as he usually is. Then we had Tyrod Taylor, who was his typical self, highs, a little bit lows. And then he went out to injury. Then we had the fan favorite, Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets, as he was called. This offense was just terrible. He was great, but it was just one of those years where he had 8% boom week, so he helped you win a couple weeks, but 56% good. The bust rate was pretty bad because this offense just really held him back.
Yeah, he like no offensive line, you know, really no receivers, no quarterback. Usually when you have that, it's not a good thing, and the defense is just key up on the run, key up on their star player, and that's exactly what they did. I mean, I'm not a defensive coordinator, but if I was, that would be my game plan, and it seems like it worked. So
yeah, it's sad. I mean, I'm gonna miss Saquon because I don't think he resigns. They're gonna try. They're probably gonna try to franchise him, and they're gonna go through this whole thing over again, all this drama, and then they're gonna trade him. We're gonna get nothing out of it, and it's just gonna be. It's a sad time, but another sad player, Tony Pollard, finished as your RB18, drafted as the RB6. So whoopsies. It was just more what could have been. Everyone heard those comments from Mike McCarthy saying we're scoring too fast. We need to keep the offense, on the field. So we're going to run the ball more. Part of that was taken out of context for the most part, but we expected him to get the lion's share of the carries, and it just didn't work out. He was inefficient. They passed the ball like crazy, and he kind of sat in the puddle of his own tears. So
yeah, we weren't really sure about him going into the season because a lot of people had him ranked high, but he had never been an RB1 before. If he had Zeke to kind of rely on. And yeah, like you said, there was just all pass heavy this year. They never really got involved, so sad.
At the end, he started picking up things a little bit better. Getting more touchdown opportunities, but didn't really help you at all. So we got Josh Jacobs here, finished as the RB23, missed a couple games, drafted as your RB8. Team was bad. They fired their head coach, and he missed some time. It's in another contract year, so buckle up for this one because this show ain't over. Is he going to sign? Same thing with Saquon. Is he going to get franchised again? Is he going to sign another deal? Is he going to go somewhere else? Is Zamir White going to be a thing? Who knows? It's going to be wish we knew then what we knew now. But sadly, we don't. So I don't know if you have anything to add on Josh Jacobs, but
no, not really. I mean, just a weird year for him. I still think he's got talent, but just between the head coach and the team, like it's hard to tell. So we'll see next year with him.
Yeah, I think he's gonna get. I think they're gonna move on from him. I don't think they're gonna let him walk. They're not gonna franchise him. He's an aging running back on a team that is probably not going too far in that division, but we'll see. Najee Harris was your RB25 finisher, drafted as your RB10. I was very excited about Najee. I thought he was going to be a bounce back this year. Team struggled. Kenny Pickett was terrible. Mitch Trubisky was not fun to watch either. And Mason Rudolph was the one that held the team together and put them on his back and made them do something. And that's going to be fun. He lost work to Jalen Warren. It wasn't good. I don't know what to think here.
Yeah, he just looks slow hitting the hole. He looked kind of like a Le'Veon Bell, but worse.
Le'Veon Bell without vision.
Without vision, yeah, pretty much. Hard to tell what his role is in the next year. Whether Jalen Warren gets more work, I don't know. But I just don't see it. I don't know how that team keeps going over 500, but I can't see him going 500 next year. No way.
It's Mike Tomlin. He just finds a way. He's a great coach. That's why, like last week, I'm like, I might take the Steelers to cover, because if there's anyone, it's kind of like Bill Belichick. Like usually used to take him to cover because coaches like that find a way. I'll just never remember. I'll never forget. Sorry. The time, I think it was week 1 or 2 or something like that. Well, we all were watching the Steelers game and we're all commenting on like, oh wow, he looks slow. And then the next time he like goes around the end and scores a touchdown, and Joe was like, "Oh, see, look, that slow man scored a touchdown." I'm like, yeah, but it was easy. I don't know. It was just funny. More sadness here. Austin Eckler. Now, this one really hurt people. He was drafted as your RB2. We're probably going to find out that he had some nagging injury. Like he was not healthy this year. He didn't look healthy. He didn't look the same. His utilization was a lot different. It was just terrible. The offense was bad. Injuries everywhere. Coach was fired. Like this is a whole. What do you do with Austin Eckler next year? Like, are you drafting him? Are you excited to draft him? Or are you just like, I guess I'll take him?
Maybe if they get Harbaugh, I would maybe take a shot at him. But other than that, he's another one of those aging running backs where, and a lot of his work comes in the pass game. Like he doesn't really rush for a ton of yards. So, yeah, I don't know. I would probably try to avoid him. He's always an injury risk. Always. I know last year I think he played almost every game last year.
Last year he was amazing.
Yeah.
That's why everyone was so excited. It was like, all right, CMC, Eckler, which one do you pick? And this year it was definitely CMC. But yeah, it's I don't know what to think. He's an awesome guy too. I mean, he plays fantasy himself, so I'd be curious to see like what he's doing, because like I know some players like I'm going to take myself in a league because hey, why not? But like I don't know if that's smart. Now we have a second year in a row for this player here. If you didn't realize, Jonathan Taylor was not mentioned above, but he's mentioned here. Finishing as your RB35. Second year in a row. Like I said, he was in this list. Injured again. Played only 9 games. He looked good. Got his deal. And I think this offense with Anthony Richardson in the small sample size we saw, and I already hear Joe saying he's going to get hurt again. But I do think with Anthony Richardson in the back at quarterback, it's going to open up so many lanes for Jonathan Taylor, because when Gardner Minshew is lined up under center, they know he ain't going to scramble. I know he can slightly, but he's not going to. With Anthony Richardson, play action is going to be his best friend. He could be one of the better this team's going to run play action all the time because they can. They can run it with him. They can throw it to Michael Pittman if they sign him to a long-term deal this year. And Anthony Richardson can run. So he's someone I think I'm going to buy any dip in drafts. Like if people are a little bit annoyed at how he can't stay healthy for a full season, if he does, he's top 2, top 3 at worst as far as talent and opportunity, in my opinion. He could be the steal of next year's draft. Do you agree with that, or you like? What are your thoughts on JT?
Yeah, I mean, as long as he's in there, as long as he's healthy, you've seen it. He's ridiculous. I mean, he's like I said, top 2, top 3, maybe even top 1. I don't know, but kind of figured after that first year where he got like 350 carries that he was going to have some injury problems. But if he can kind of come back next year, get put those aside and play 15, 16 games, I mean, the sky's the limit for him, honestly. And he's still really young, so
yeah, I'd be very, very excited to have JT on my team. He's going to be someone I'm going to target the hell out of between now and next year in any draft I do, because he's so good at football. And I know there's a lot of fatigue right now. Like Lamar, same thing. People are kind of done drafting, or felt like they were done drafting Lamar, because every year it's like the same injury. That's how CMC felt for a bit too. It was like 2 years in a row was lost to injury. But now look at it. If you buy that dip on a good, talented player in a good situation, I'm going to take that bet. If it blows up in my face, fine. But you're going to miss the shots. Like Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And this is a shot I'm going to take 9 times out of 10. I will be taking the shot because he's too talented in a situation that could be amazing for him. We haven't seen this offense, all the pieces together yet. Anthony Richardson played 2 games this year. This could be one of the biggest changing offenses next year. So I'm trying actively to acquire any piece of the Indianapolis Colts because I think they're going to be one of the best teams next year for fantasy.
That's fair. I do have kind of a closing question for you.
Shoot.
So me being a Browns fan, a guy that wasn't mentioned on here, what do you think the outlook for Nick Chubb is next year?
I don't know. I mean, Nick Chubb, talent-wise, is probably top 5 running back in the league. He could be even higher. I mean, when he's on the field, you feel a difference when he's on the field versus when he's off the field. So it really depends on what they're going to do. Like, are they going to try to restructure him to keep him there on like more of a hometown discount, or is he going to try to get some money? But the injury, I know everything I've read so far has been kind of positive in that he's recovering pretty well from it, but an aging running back coming off major injury, I don't know what to expect. I feel like he's going to be relevant for fantasy, but I don't know what team is going to invest into him what I think the Browns would have if he was healthy this year and did Nick Chubb things. So, I mean, I'm assuming you hope they re-sign him, correct?
Well, he is still under contract for next year. Next year is his last year. So he will be on the Browns next year. It's just, how's it going to look? I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping he comes back and looks the same, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know too much about how we'd have to like kind of look into that and see who's had that injury and kind of compare year one. But I mean, a lot of times major injuries, you see these guys year one post injury, they're just not the same. It's year 2, but is Nick Chubb going to have the year 2 after that? We're going to really be looking at him the same. That's where it's the unfortunate thing of just being the nature of the position where they just don't last long. In the eyes of the NFL GM, they're like, use them and abuse them. Like, let's go to the next kid. Which is sad because I mean, Nick Chubb, I mean, that injury that looked rough, and he doesn't deserve anything like that. But he's just so good. He's someone like I'm not a Browns fan. I'm a Giants fan. But you get attached to some of these players and you watch them, like, wow, that guy's good. Like you can see it with your eyeballs. It doesn't matter if you know much. It's like, okay, the team's better when he's on the field. It just the conversation changes now because of that injury, unfortunately. So
okay.
I don't know.
Cool. I just want to hear your thoughts on it. That's all. Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I hope he comes back because I think it'd be good. I just don't know what to expect until we get more news on what he's doing and how the team is going to go, because I'm sure they're going to have some changes in there as well. But all right, well, that's going to wrap things up for us. So check out the next episode next week. We're going to go over wide receivers. Same thing. You can, like I said earlier in the show, please follow us on X. You can follow the show there. We're going to probably be posting some things there. Going to have some articles and different things to kind of help as we get to the off season. There's going to be a lot of things changing, so we're going to stay on top of that. Like, share, subscribe. We're on YouTube. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it, we're there. So please follow the show, and we'll catch you on the next one. So good chatting with you, Warren. We'll see you on the next one.
For sure.
All right. So long, everyone.
Too.
Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of the Heroes of Fantasy Football podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the Heroes FF.